This is Duke University.
Thanks. We are missing one of our speakers. She is, I think, on her way from a meeting in Raleigh, so she should be here any minute. So I want to introduce myself. My name is Haley Warden. I'm the president of Outlaw. All of Outlaw has been working really hard on putting this event together, and we're also really thankful to have some co-sponsors on this: Human Rights Law Society, Duke Law Democrats, Duke Law ACLU, and a lot of help from Professor Hannah Demerit and Stella Boswell, who just stepped out to take a call from Senator Kinnaird. After we talk today, we have some voting registration forms down here for any of you that moved to North Carolina and still haven't gotten around to changing your registration. And we also have a sign-up sheet for an email list to get voting reminders and information. If that's all you want, that's all you have to get. And then you can also sign up to get more involved in the fight against the amendment. So as you know, we're here today to talk about the North Carolina so-called Defense of Marriage Amendment, which will be on the May 2012 primary ballot. That also includes the Republican presidential primary, which means that the majority of voters that have an incentive to go out there, other than all of you, are going to be Republicans voting in that partisan primary. Same-sex marriage is already banned by statute in North Carolina, and the legislature recently voted to put this constitutional ban to the voters. The amendment would read as follows, as you can see up here: marriage between one man and one woman is the only domestic legal union that shall be valid or recognized in this state. Later, they added an additional sentence: this section does not prohibit a private party from entering into contracts with another private party, nor does this section prohibit courts from adjudicating the rights of private parties pursuant to such contracts. And the one thing I really want to emphasize here is domestic legal union. This is a new term that is a stranger to all of jurisprudence in North Carolina. So it creates a lot of the uncertainty that makes this amendment concerning. So today we're honored to have three esteemed guests join us, two right now. They're taking time out of their busy schedules to join us, so I really want to thank them for being here today. Starting closest to me, Sharon Thompson is a former North Carolina House Representative, practices family law in Durham, representing LGBT clients on many issues. She's received awards from the North Carolina ACLU, the North Carolina AFL-CIO, Planned Parenthood of Raleigh, and the North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys for her legislative and client work. So we're glad to have her here today. Professor Lydia Lavelle is on the board of Alderman in Carrboro, where she and her partner are registered domestic partners. She teaches at North Carolina Central University School of Law and is a former president of the North Carolina Association of Women Lawyers. Our third guest, who will be here shortly, is Senator Ellie Kinnaird. She's in her 7th term, although I think it might be 8th term, as a North Carolina state senator. She represents Orange and Person counties, so that includes Carrboro and Chapel Hill. Previously, she served as mayor of Carrboro for 8 years and worked as a legal services attorney and in private practice before that. So I have a few questions prepared for our panelists to get us started, and then we'll open up the floor to questions hopefully with 15 or more minutes to go. So we'll start with Professor Lavelle. So Carrboro, Durham, Chapel Hill, and several other municipalities in North Carolina have made strides in recent years toward granting benefits parity for municipal employees, and some other strides toward equal treatment for same-sex couples. And I was wondering, as a local government representative and someone in a registered domestic partnership, could you tell us a little bit more about what you see the implications of this amendment could be?
Sure. And Haley, thanks for organizing this event. It's a great turnout, and I'm happy to be here to speak with everyone. This is a really, really important issue, and happy to see you all here. First, I wanted to talk very quickly about what a domestic legal partnership is, so to say. As Haley mentioned, in North Carolina, there are only 7 municipalities or counties that have domestic registries or domestic partner benefits. And Carrboro was actually the first one to have such a registry. It was back in 1994. And something I think that's interesting. Anyone here live in Carrboro? Okay, it's a pretty, yeah, my neighbor. It's a pretty liberal place, and so it was the first to have first gay mayor in North Carolina. And anyway, in 1994, when they decided to have domestic partner registry, I went back and looked at the minutes, and I see here a discussion of domestic partners issues, and the board was considering the registration of domestic partners, adding domestic partners to the financial disclosure requirements for elected officials, and extending health insurance benefits. And the mayor, who was Ellie Kennard, who's going to be here today, she was the mayor at the time, stated she had received 5 letters in favor of the domestic partners ordinance and 21 against the proposals. Okay, so even back then, or certainly back then, I guess, when the first time trying to have this happen, more people than not were against it. And then, interestingly, I see that they voted unanimously to amend the ordinance to allow the filing of domestic partnerships. They voted unanimously to have it apply to disclosures involving financial interests of the domestic partners, but then they took no action on extending health insurance benefits to the domestic partners of town employees, and that came sometime later. So, this was some 20 years ago. Here we are today in North Carolina, where only 7 municipalities now have domestic partner benefits, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I wanted to say, when you get a domestic partner, well, first of all, there's a registry that you just basically sign up and you say we're domestic partners, and that's it. You don't really get anything extra by signing up as domestic partners. And what I did this year with my partner, symbolically, on March 3rd, 2011, the 100th anniversary of Carrboro, we went down to Town Hall and had a kind of a signing and became official domestic partners because we were so outraged that this amendment has come back up now this year, really for the first time out of committee. But to sign up for the domestic partner registry, our statute, our code ordinance, we had to affirm that we were not related by blood closer than would bar marriage, that we were not married or related by marriage, that we shared the common necessities of life, that we were 18 or older, that we were competent to enter into a contract, we had to declare we were each other's sole domestic partner, agree to be responsible for each other's welfare, and agree to notify the town of any change in the status of our domestic partnership, and state that we had not previously filed one, and if we had been dissolved at least 12 years prior. Many states that have domestic partner benefits have similar type kind of rules. It's a little easier to get married, run off to Las Vegas and get married than to do this. And that's one of the other things about being domestic partners is there are a lot more kind of restrictions put on it, and you don't get very many of the benefits. So just a little background I wanted to give. As far as domestic partner benefits, it doesn't seem like saying much to say that you just only 5 or 7 towns have domestic partner benefits in North Carolina, but still, those gay people who live in those towns kind of look on that with a sense of pride, because it does show that their government cares about them, that they're a little more welcome in their community, and if they sign up for the registry, that's one way of showing their kind of partnership they have with their partner. But it also provides evidence of a partnership that allows them to get domestic partner benefits through their employer. It's a way they can show they're domestic partners. These employers sometimes have affidavits they can fill out that do the same thing. And this amendment very clearly would impact any type of municipal domestic partner benefits or county domestic partner benefits. Very clearly by the language even of the second line here, which says this doesn't apply to private contracts. It would apply to municipal and county contracts. And I wanted to say one thing, Haley, that second line up there you have, there's some dispute as to whether that's actually going to be on the ballot. So if it's not on the ballot, it's even a worse proposal. So,
Thank you. So we can all welcome Senator Kennard. Thank you so much for coming.
Sorry.
And
Parked way up there.
I'll give our second question to you, Ms. Thompson, and then I have a question for Senator Kennard. So, Ms. Thompson, as a family lawyer, I'm sure you have clients coming in with any number of problems that may or may not be related to marital status or lack thereof. So we wanted to learn a little more about how the amendment might affect the lives of your clients, LGBT and straight, who are unmarried.
Thanks, Haley, and thank you all for the invite to come here. And it's great always to come back to law school, although every time I come, you all look younger and younger. I think the one word I could think of for what the effect this amendment might have on my clients is devastating. I mean, we have very few legal protections for gay families, gay individuals, gay partners, and this would basically eviscerate all the legal protections we now have and leave them with not much of anything. And I think as as Lydia just mentioned, there is some question, and I think Senator Kinnaird will maybe help enlighten us about that. The final bill did include the language about private contracts in the bill, but it did not in the section about what's going to appear on the ballot. That language does not appear on the ballot, and the ballot is just asking if you're for or against the first question about domestic legal union. So that there's some sort of, I don't know how one's going to interpret that, but even if you assume that the language about private contracts passes, that still is going to leave many, many problems, including, and I'll just briefly talk about them and then some more in details, how it's going to affect child custody and visitation. Those aren't private contracts. Domestic violence protection that our laws provide, that will still be impacted. Trust, wills, end-of-life issues, power of attorney, those are not private contracts. Those are documents that one may have to ask the courts to enforce, and that's where one gets into a problem. And it certainly could invalidate any domestic partner benefits, such as Carrboro has if it's a municipality. It may not affect now employer contracts, but it could certainly affect any municipality that tried to have benefits. So those are still problems out there that were not rectified at all by the final change in the language. And as Haley mentioned, I think one of the big starting issues is, what the hell is domestic legal union, and that is not ever been addressed in North Carolina law in any fashion whatsoever. And so then we're going to have years and years of litigation as to what does that mean. And it also, one thing it does also mean is that we do know for a fact is that this also applies, the domestic legal union applies not only to same sex but opposite sex. So this is going to also say that you can't even recognize any legal issues between unmarried heterosexual couples. And pursuant to the recent census, it's estimated there's over 186,000 unmarried couples in North Carolina, 91% of whom are heterosexual. So it certainly is going to have an impact on that community too. And one other point to make, and it may sound like a small or silly one, but in fact it could be a significant one, is that people could move to this. If our laws are so bad here, people could literally move to our state to try to get out of the laws of another state. It happens in the child custody field. It's happening more in property fields that people find out where the law is most favorable to them, and they're gonna move there. And if someone's trying to get out of giving property because they've broken up with their spouse with their partner who they promised to give certain property to, they can move to North Carolina, and then they can get out of any promises that they might have had. So, and that's clearly happened in a lot of custody cases. People move to find a favorable custody jurisdiction. So there's a fear that that's going to happen here. And I've seen it in the opposite. I've seen ever since the Bozeman case last year, many of my clients have moved from North Carolina because we can no longer do second parent adoptions here, where the partner adopts the biological person's child. So people have literally moved from North Carolina for that reason. And of course it limits people who might want to otherwise come and be employed by Duke University or work in the Triangle in a tech company or something. They're going to maybe think twice about it. Well, maybe I will say that there are two other states, Idaho and South Carolina, that have amendments that use the language domestic legal union. But in both those states, even though they were passed in '06 and in '07, there has not yet been any legal determination in those states as to what a domestic legal union means. So that's how long it takes to even get to that point. Just quickly, in terms of domestic violence, our state statute is pretty good and does cover unmarried same-sex and opposite-sex couples. And if this amendment were to pass, all those legal protections that really protect people from such a serious problem as domestic violence, they would not be protected. There would not be criminal laws protecting them. They couldn't get restraining orders. All the government agencies that work to help and protect victims, they would call into question what they can or can't do. And then finally, just quickly in terms of estate planning documents, I mean, this is the one area where you can do documents, and you know, if you want to leave anything to your partner, you have to do a will. If you want to make your partner make your healthcare decisions, you have to do a healthcare power of attorney. If you can't do those documents, you know, the default is the law of the state as to how property passes if you die without a will, and if you die without a will, it's going to pass to your next of kin. So the only way you can provide for your partner is by doing these documents. And if you're prohibited from doing these documents, there'll essentially be absolutely no way you could leave your property to your partner or have your partner make your health care decisions. And particularly, there are significant things, your who can make your funeral decisions, who can dispose of your remains. All those things, the only way you could get your partner to do that is if you say so in a document. Otherwise, and I've had this happen, one of the reasons I tell people to do a will is for even reasons like funeral. A funeral home will not even talk to a partner unless there's a document. And even sometimes when there's a document that says they should, they often don't think they have to. And then the other thing is, even if wills and trusts may be upheld, it's going to just put the whole question of are they valid or are they not a little more uncertain, which only invites more family member challenges. And so if a family member really wants to come in and challenge, they, maybe this is a good time to challenge it. And like over the years, when I first started practicing law, we were really worried about family members coming in and saying the partner was unduly influencing the other, they're of unsound mind, and there was challenges purely on the you must not have a sound mind if you're in a same-sex relationship, and it sounds sort of crazy, but and we advocate people videotape their and talk about that's what they want in the will, and all. We went to a lot of extremes, and nowadays I still have this form I have my clients fill out, and I've been starting to think I should just stop doing this. I haven't had clients that have said family challenges in a long time, but I'm worried that we'll go back to that when the door is sort of open. And even just little things like I include in my wills, I identify the person's partner as my life partner or my domestic partner. And partly we do it because clients want to do it. A lot of my clients want to say spouse because they went somewhere else and got married, and I have to talk them out of spouse, but because that could cause them problems. But people do want to put in life partner, and also it's an educational tool for the clerks of court who are handling the probate and stuff, and rather than say my friend, which just sounds like it could be any of your friend, I mean, it was an intentional purpose for the client, intentional to let the clerks know this is really my life partner, this is my domestic partner, and that and to treat it that way, and I think it has been a good educational tool. But if this marriage amendment comes in effect, I think I have to go back and revise all my wills and take out that kind of language is the fear, and that's what you might have to do. So that's just some of the problems, and I may be sounding like an alarmist. Let me just close with one other. This issue came in terms of some end-of-life issues came up where Nebraska had a marriage amendment, and the legislature was considering passing a bill about donating organs and dealing with a person's remain. And the legislature asked the Attorney General in Nebraska, well, can we pass this law and would it violate the marriage amendment? And the Attorney General there concluded that if the state accorded domestic partners the right to dispose of a deceased person's remains and donate organs, that would in fact be prohibited by the marriage amendment in Nebraska. So that's, these things do happen. Leave it at that for now.
Thank you. So Senator Kinnaird, we'd love to ask, with your experience in the North Carolina legislature, just trying to understand why North Carolina took so long to come to this point, partially because North Carolina, as some of you may know, is the only southern state without such an amendment. And so just wondering kind of the background on how it came to be and what the debate was like in the legislature, whether this was fueled by hatred, religion, something else. We'd love to get your perspective.
Well, I can't speak for anybody else. I take no ownership whatsoever of this bill. I feel pretty good. I was from the divinity schools. I think I'm drinking holy water. This feels pretty good over here. Well, I remind people of several things. First of all, this is the state that elected Jesse Helms over and over and over again. This is the state that did not ratify women's right to vote until 1971. So when you ask why this bill is passed now, that is a very good example. Because if you've all read about Art Pope and getting all of these very conservative bills through, or Republicans elected, that's what happened. Now, interestingly, there are libertarians, which Pope is supposed to be, as John Locke Foundation. But on the other hand, there are these people who have been trying. When you ask why didn't it happen for so long, you've got the Democrats to thank for that. Because what happened was this was introduced year after year, session after session, and we kept it bottled up. Now, when the Republicans took over for the first time in 104 years, that's the first thing they did, was they promised each of these groups that had wanted to have all of their agenda, the abortion bill, which is called Women's Right to Know, passed easily. And then there were a number of people who didn't want that passed but went along to go along. And then this one came along. Now, you have to understand the caucus system is where whatever the Democratic Senate caucus and the Republican Senate caucus is, we meet on a regular basis and we thrash things out and then we make a decision. Now, the Democrats will always say, vote your conscience. But the Republican caucus binds their members. And there were several people who did not want to vote for this bill. And they got very much punished when they rebelled on the abortion bill. And so this is where they had to toe the line. Now, there's a very old doctor there. He's a doctor, he's a senator, and he's a general in the reserves. And this has been his bill that he has introduced year after year after year. And so he's unfortunately dying. He's very ill. He's got a blood disease. But this is what they did for him. They promised him. Now, there were a number of libertarians and Tea Partiers who did not want to vote for this bill. But they sort of did it in honor of Dr. Forrester, Senator Forrester. And so this was their promise that they had made. And as I say, they bound their members that they had to vote for this bill. Now, what happens if you don't vote for the bill when your caucus tells you you have to? Well, you're tossed out. They actually tossed a Republican out some years ago, Wood, I can't think of his name right now. And they will then have other punishment. Some of the punishment will be you'll never get another bill heard. Another punishment might be you won't get a committee chairmanship. So there are a lot of repercussions if you don't go along. And while we were able to bottle it up, even though there were some Democrats who might have felt they had to vote for it, we kept it bottled up, and so they never were forced into that position. But since the Republicans had gotten in after 104 years and they promised this constituency they were going to pass these bills, they passed it. We had a very good debate on the floor. And I want to say that Lydia and I have worked to try to get some of these bills for Carrboro through. And of course, they had a little sort of a flopping chance before, but believe me, they got nothing now, where we wanted to add sexual orientation to our, was it housing discrimination bill? And so we know that what we hope, by the way, I'm glad to hear you say that, Sharon, that maybe this will be tied up in the courts for a number of years. But we know that there are repercussions pretty quickly. The business community came out strongly against it. And they wrote us, and they had many, many signatories to saying, do not do this. The co-founder of Facebook was born in Hickory, and he wrote and he said, do not do this. Over and over they said, to bring in the best and the brightest and the most creative, we've got to have a welcoming atmosphere. And this is not a welcoming atmosphere. First we had the abortion bill, now we have this. This is not a welcoming atmosphere. So when companies come in, and I think there are 5,000 companies in the United States that recognize benefits for same-sex couples and domestic partners, heterosexual. And they were very much opposed to this. We have certain questions that I think we have to look at. One of them is equal protection of the laws. Are we going to get that through our Supreme Court anytime soon? Now, I don't have any faith in this Supreme Court right now. Sometimes it's better to not take things to the court. The Bozeman case was bad law. Too bad they took that case. Because we make bad law when we do that. I worked for Prisoner Legal Services for many years, and believe me, we were representing the despised of society, and our rule was, don't take a case if you're going to make bad law. If you take it there and then it's decided against you, that's on the books. Now, some things are not published, but that's on the books. So you don't want to take a case prematurely until you know that it's sort of like when you litigate something. You want to know what the other guy's going to say and do and what they have. You don't want to go in there ignorant. You have to know what the answer to your questions is. We have to know before we carry this all the way to the big Supreme Court that we've got the noses lined up to decide in our favor. And that is the thing. But I think it's going to be ultimately decided as an equal protection of the laws issue. And that's certainly one of the things that we argued on the floor, was this is an equal protection of the laws. And got in a lot of email debates with people. I sent out a new weekly newsletter, and that was one of the ones that I reported on. And I was on some radio show, I don't even know what it was, probably a conservative radio show with debating a person on the other side. And we got into this equal protection of the laws business. And he says, but the law says it's between a man and a woman. I said, no, the law says it's between contracts, between two people. You know, you can't say some with blue eyes can get married and some with brown eyes can't get married. So if you say one group of people can get married under the law, then you have to say other people. Well, then they say polygamy. No, it has nothing to do with polygamy. That's been outlawed since 1900. Now, if you had a law in which Muslims could, or Mormons could practice polygamy, but Muslims couldn't, that would be something. But nobody can practice polygamy, so don't bring that up in this argument. It's ridiculous. It got brought up, don't worry. Another really serious problem is full faith and credit. We have no idea what's going to happen. And I like to read little bits of the Constitution every night. Just makes me feel good. Used to read the Bible every night, but I've gotten through that a couple times. So, but the full faith and credit is right there in the Constitution. And it says that you will honor all laws of other states. You can't interfere. So how is that going to be decided? I think that's a big issue. And as I say, we don't want to go too fast on this. We want to make sure that this is going to pass in the United States Supreme Court based on those two issues. And so that's what we're sort of looking to the future on, and timing is crucial on this. I think it's 30 states now have this. That's bad because I'm going to give you an example from the death penalty field. We used to execute the mentally incompetent, the developmentally disabled, whatever the word is these days. And we went through a big period of, I've worked on death penalty issues since I've been there, and we passed a prohibition on executing the mentally disabled. And when the Supreme Court decided the next year on this issue, this is sort of the evolving standards of decency argument, and they looked at the states, the number of states that had decided this, and they said, this is what the states and the people are thinking. So if we get too many states, I'm worried, too many states that do not allow same-sex marriage, they could say that. This Supreme Court could say that. So I think we have to be very, very careful of that. That's very difficult. I think that when they said we're the only southeastern state without this, I got up and I said, I'm proud of us. Isn't that great? We're leaders. We used to be leaders in a lot of areas. We should be leaders. We should not be. We should say we are the only southeastern state without marriage amendment. That is good. Now, the one thing I've learned in all this, because I've been on this for quite a while, as I say, for the death penalty, and then the abortion issue, and then this, is don't get in a scripture war, because you'll never win. So what I'm hoping that we will find eventually is that the courts will say, yes, this is an equal protection, full faith and credit issue, and that we'll say to the legislature, you were wrong on segregated schools, remember? You were wrong when you said that blacks and whites couldn't marry. You were wrong on many issues. Wouldn't it be nice to be right for a change? Let's be leaders. Nobody thought that was a good argument except the Democrats. But we did hold our Democrats. We held all but one, and he stayed away so he didn't have to vote on that.
Did you want to respond?
Yeah, can I make a couple quick comments? One is, with regard to Ellie's equal protection kind of point, I'm working on a short article for lay people about Loving versus Virginia, and just kind of comparing, if you track the language of that, and you track the language with what's going on now, it's very, very compelling. Secondly, I heard on the radio this morning a new survey that I thought was interesting, and I just wanted to quickly tell you all this. This survey was one with regard to banning same-sex marriage, and it said that it has found the amendment would pass by a 61 to 34 margin if the election were today. And it was comparing it to how last month they were asked, the exact kind of same poll, phrased slightly differently, also pointed out that it would not only ban same-sex marriage, but would also prohibit domestic partnerships. And when it was asked that way, 55% were opposed. So, one of the huge messages that has to get out with regard to this amendment is how far-reaching it is. Because while many, many people in North Carolina still are not quite there with same-sex marriage, many, many, many are fine with civil unions, domestic partnerships, and that point needs to be made. And lastly, we keep talking about the May Republican primary. I mean, it is a primary for everyone. It's just that you kind of think that more Republicans might come out because right now they have they don't know who their nominee is going to be. But in fact, by that point, it might actually already be decided anyway. So that may be a little bit less of a key point than some people are making.
But that's a very good point. They moved it from November, and they got some Democratic votes in the House, to May. What we've got to be careful of is that they're going to bus people to the polls, the ones who are in favor of the amendment. They're going to bus people to the polls. We've got to get the word out that it's so important to get to the polls and defeat this. I'm afraid that it's going to pass. I'm very worried over that, and it's going to be partly because excuse me, the far-right churches are going to be very organized, and we've just got to get people to the polls.
can I just follow up further, is what Lydia said of the message to get out there. I think the other message to get out there is how much impacts opposite sex couples. I mean, this isn't just banning same-sex marriage, this is banning any protections that our law might afford to either opposite or same-sex. So opposite sex couples are gonna lose their domestic violence benefits, their child custody rights, their rights to enter into end-of-life documents, so.
Well,
You know, and the number, and given, I was surprised at the number, 186,000 couples in the state, that should, should have an impact.
What's interesting is that they worried enough about that. They thought that was enough of an argument that they put that on there. Well, now, if they're really, really, for marriage, how come they put that little clause in there? Because they were worried about the business community. I think that's the one thing that they really did respond to.
Well, we are getting a little bit close to the end of our time. We probably have time for one or two questions. So, you, sir, and then you in the back.
A quick question and a comment. Question is, this is the new language about, banning domestic unions except for marriage. But same-sex marriage is already illegal in North Carolina. So what does the current statute on marriage say? Does it just say marriage shall consist of a union between one man and one woman, so it doesn't say anything about other domestic arrangements?
It just says that the only legally recognized marriage is between man.
Yeah, it's
one
not
man
as
and
far-reaching,
Okay.
yeah.
And then quickly, Senator Kinnaird, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I wanted to put a couple of your fellow Democrats on the spot, because I kind of felt like those Democrats in the House sold us out, in the sense of, they only got the votes when they agreed to move it to May, which meant it wouldn't draw Republican votes out to the voters out to the general election, but it made it more likely that it would ultimately pass. And what went on in the Democratic Party? Was there any effort to try and hold those in line? I know it's a different House, and so, but.
Well, they've been rebels from the beginning. They voted for the Republican budget and voted to override the governor's veto of the budget. So they've been out there all along. And this is a conservative state. Those are folks who might not get elected if they were voting for this. So it's hard to say. And we can only speak for our own constituency. I have a great constituency, Orange and Chatham County. This gal. Vote for her if you
There's
live
one
in
here, I checked.
Carrboro.
I'm with Stella.
Go ahead.
I'm from Missouri, and I don't know if it seems pretty similar politically, very balanced, Republican Democrat. And this has come up several times. It's almost the exact same issue where Republican or conservative-leaning provisions from constitutional amendments have been up on the primary ballot, and they have 100% been approved or defeated, whatever the conservative opinion may be at that point. But so is this an insurmountable task? Because like I said, I've never seen it happen in a basically 50-50 state, because Democratic constituencies generally minority, generally people that need to be very motivated, generally are more urban, not going to come to the polls for the primary election. The conservative voters are the people that come out for every single election. And so is there any way to really mobilize enough support, or how would you do that?
So just to put it into the recording, because we are recording today, is there a shot at stopping this?
Well, I'll say, I'll say this. I mean, I'm also, like Ellie, I'm a little nervous about it, but I see people all around me who say, what can I do? How can I help? What are we going to organize? How are we going to organize? I think right now people are kind of just a flutter. And the statewide gay rights advocacy group, Equality NC, just hired a new executive director who is starting, I think, this week or next week. And so part of what's going on right now is it's been a transition for the group that's going to help mobilize a lot of folks. The Equality Conference is November 12th in Greensboro. You can Google it online. They love to have everyone there, including students. And I think out of that, in addition to a lot of other initiatives that are going on. But I think anyone who says, what can I do, can get involved with equality, and they'll tell you what to do. Because, folks, it's going to get, after the first of the year, it's going to get very, very, could get ugly. But it's also going to be in the news, every day. So.
It's equalitync.org, their website. And we also link to them on the Outlaw website, so you can Google us too.
And I think just to add, there is a whole coalition forming of all sorts of other groups to give it a really broad base of support. So there, and I think part of the reason you haven't heard anything exactly right now, I think they want to get a good strategy together, a good ground organization. I know the ACLU has hired a grassroots LGBT directed person to help just on the marriage amendment. So I think people are getting their groundwork together and probably we'll start having some big
And
announcements.
a lot of the churches, I think, are also.
Yeah, there'll
getting
be
together.
Yeah, we had
churches,
about-
social workers,
yeah.
teachers, all that will
We had about
coalesce.
150 church who's asked us to defeat this, and so they're going to be active
Active.
too. But getting to the polls, that's the most important. I don't know how many of you are even from North Carolina, but if you aren't yourself, get anybody you know who to get to the polls.
You don't need to be from North Carolina to vote if you've lived in the state for 30 days prior to the election. So all of you are eligible to register, and I have registration forms down here. So
Then you can change afterwards.
And you-
if you want,
The
when you-
lawyer's
or if you move.
so we have time. We have about 1 minute left. Did you want to ask a question?
Any sense of how national politics are going to come into this? It seems like with the presidential election looming in the news everywhere all the time right now, that this is going to be the focus of a lot of national attention, which can play both ways. I mean,
Well, I think
unfortunately, probably the wrong way, but.
I think these Occupy Wall Street is such a great movement. And I think that people are going to get to the polls because they're so angry. We had one in Chapel Hill, and they're all over. And I think that things are changing. I think they've overreached. And that's our hope, is that the overreaching will get people to the polls.
I think at the point of national politics, I know when they announced that the Democratic National Convention was going to be in Charlotte, I know the folks in Charlotte started gearing up and thinking, we don't want our city to be seen as backward on the national stage, and I think that's what pushed their drive for domestic partner benefits. And the LGBT community in that region is kind of seeing kind of some growth because of that coming next summer.
I think the experience in other states, we're gonna be flooded on both sides. Millions and millions of dollars are gonna be spent on both sides, and it's just, it's gonna be on every billboard, and, and we'll have people from national organizations down here all the time.
Now, look what happened to California, of all places.
Yeah, it's just, it's gonna get crazy.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. Let's give you a
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.